NordVPN. Get 70% off NordVPN, only $349 a month. Plus, you get 4 additional months for free at nordvpn.com/simplehistory or use the promo code simplehistory. Britain's most violent prisoner. The 20th century. Charles Bronson was born Michael Gordon Peterson on December 6, 1952, in the town of Luton, Bedfordshire, England, to Era and Joe Peterson. He was also one of 3 brothers and was from a respectable family. By all accounts, he was a nice and likable child, but as he grew up and became a teenager, he started to get more and more into trouble. During his school years, he was constantly playing truant, preferring a life of petty crime. But more worryingly, a nasty streak started to emerge in him as he enjoyed more and more getting into violent fights. After Peterson left school, he had trouble holding down steady employment. He ended up doing a number of different jobs over the next few years, including working in a supermarket where he attacked his manager, on building sites, in various factories, and even as a furniture remover. But none of these jobs lasted very long, and more often than not, he was quickly fired for his abrupt manner and fierce temper. The only thing Peterson seemed to have an affinity for was crime. In the 3 years after he left school, he got into trouble for a variety of things, like smashing up parked cars after an argument with his girlfriend's father, crashing a stolen lorry, and being involved in a smash-and-grab raid. But luckily for him, each time he was only fined and given probation. Then it seemed that he may well had learned his lesson and grown out of this rebellious and self-destructive stage, for in 1971, at the age of 19, he met Irene Kelsey. They fell quickly in love and married the following year. Shortly afterwards, they were blessed by the birth of a baby boy. But soon he was back to his old ways, and in 1974 he was convicted of the serious crime of armed robbery and sentenced to 7 years imprisonment. During this time, Irene divorced him, and his incarceration turned out to be a lot longer than the original sentence, as he earned an extra 6 years for repeatedly attacking prison guards and fellow prisoners, often with broken glass bottles, as well as for damaging prison property. He was seen as such a dangerous inmate that he had to spend long stretches of time in solitary confinement, and at times he had to be sedated or kept in chains as he was so unstable and violent. Peterson ended up in a high-security psychiatric ward. His behavior then became even more erratic, and he staged several rooftop protests as well as a short-lived hunger strike. When he was finally released in 1987 after 13 years in prison, he embarked on a short-lived career as an illegal bare-knuckle boxer in the East End of London. He adopted the stage name of Charles Bronson, who was a famous American actor in the 1960s and 70s, who often played tough law enforcement officers or moralistic vengeful vigilantes. Just a year later, he robbed a jewelry shop, surprising his girlfriend with a ring and selling off the rest. Charged under his fighting name, Charles Bronson, he gave up his old name of Peterson. After 69 days of freedom, he was back in custody, convicted of armed robbery for robbing a jewelry shop, and was sentenced to another 7 years in prison. Once again, Bronson was far from being a model prisoner. He continued to attack prison guards and fellow prisoners, so much so that he had to be moved numerous times, and his reputation became so bad that one prison in Bedford refused to have him. By attacking others, he was not only adding to his sentence, but also earning transfers between prisons. Subsequently, because of his antisocial behavior, he again spent a considerable amount of time in solitary confinement. Surprisingly, he only served 4 years of his sentence and was released from prison in 1992. In a few months, he was back inside again, accused of planning a robbery, though the charges were eventually dropped. But he was found guilty of assault for breaking the nose of the boyfriend of an ex-girlfriend. And despite his criminal and violent past, he escaped prison time and was given a 600-pound fine. You would have thought that Bronson might have tried to control his anger issues, but just 16 days later, he was again arrested. This was for planning another robbery and for illegally possessing a sawn-off shotgun, a very serious crime in Britain, which has some of the toughest anti-gun laws in the world. While he was on remand, he did not help the situation by taking a librarian hostage, demanding, among things, a helicopter, an inflatable doll, and a cup of tea. Bronson was disgusted at the hostage when he farted in front of him, so he released him. The situation was then diffused by the police negotiators, who never gave him his helicopter. There is no record if the police gave in to his demands for a cup of tea. At his trial, Bronson was found guilty for possessing a shotgun and was given an 8-year sentence in 1993. His behavior was now getting totally out of hand, and in 1994 he took the deputy governor of Hull Prison hostage for 4 hours. Then the following year, he attacked the governor of Highdown Prison in North Surrey. It didn't stop there. In 1996, while in Birmingham Prison, he took a doctor hostage, which luckily ended peacefully. Later that year, he took 3 fellow prisoners hostage and made more colorful demands, like asking for a plane to take him to Libya, as well as an Uzi submachine gun, 5,000 rounds of ammunition, and an axe. He also demanded ice cream and slashed himself with a razor before surrendering. A further 5 years was added to his sentence for these offenses. But Bronson's disruptive behavior kept on continuing. In 1999, he took a civilian education officer hostage for 44 hours and went on a rampage because he criticized one of his drawings. He wrecked part of the prison, damaging fridges, washing machines, and furniture as he did so. Finally, the authorities had no choice but to give Bronson a life sentence, as he was obviously a habitual and violent criminal. They could see he was beyond rehabilitation and forever a danger to the public and himself. The sad truth of the matter was that in the last 25 years, he was only out of prison for a grand total of 6 months. Because he was such a difficult prisoner, they were forced to build a special high-security unit at Woodhill Prison to house him and other ultra-violent prisoners. But finally, things did seem to change in Bronson for the good when he married a mother-of-1 Bangladeshi divorcee who had only just started to visit him. Bronson converted to his new wife's faith, and for a time Bronson started to call himself Charles Ali Ahmed. He seemed for a while much more stable, and it looked like married life had a calming effect on him. But in 2005, after 4 years of marriage, the couple divorced, and he renounced his faith. By 2007, he was back to his old ways, and prison guards narrowly avoided yet another hostage situation. Several times Bronson appealed against his life sentence, as well as requesting parole, but he was refused every time. In 2013, he even appealed to British Prime Minister David Cameron to be released, backed up by a petition of 10,000 signatures supporting this request. However, this request was point-blankly denied. Then in 2014, Bronson legally changed his name to Charles Salvador in honor of one of his great idols, Salvador Dali, the Spanish surrealist painter. With Bronson's reputation for violent and destructive outbursts spanning over 4 decades, he may never be released from prison. His reputation for being the most notorious and violent prisoner in Britain is well-deserved, but what made him that way? Psychiatrists can't seem to agree what is actually wrong with him. It may well be that he is simply a man with a lot of anger management issues, for Bronson has said on many occasions he has a short, violent temper that he finds hard to control. Behind his violent exterior is someone who is well-read and said to be highly intelligent. Bronson is a talented artist, an award-winning poet, and a published author of a variety of books. He's also a fitness fanatic. And maybe he has finally calmed down, as recently, when much to his disgust, his prison served croquettes instead of chips at lunchtime. Rather than hold a person hostage or attack someone, he instead filed a strongly worded formal written complaint to the prison authorities. It took a lot of security to take on this prisoner, but to protect yourself, all you need is NordVPN. Secure yourself from online threats using its 5,500-plus super-fast servers in over 60 countries. In a coffee shop or an airport watching Simple History or reading history articles to pass the time, protect your data when connected to public Wi-Fi spots. You can also unlock content and shows that are blocked in your country by simply switching to another country. NordVPN is compatible with Windows, macOS, iOS, Android, and PC, mobile, and tablet. Get 70% off NordVPN, only $349 a month. Plus, you get 4 additional months for free at nordvpn.com/simplehistory. or use the promo code simplehistory. And if you're not happy, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee.
My name's Charles Bronson.